Leonarda, the woman whose obsession with her son became so disgusting that it resulted in human sacrifice. And then, of course, we have Tillie. Our Chicago fans know of good old Tillie, who just offed a couple of her husbands and a few of her neighbors just because they simply annoyed her. Go ahead, grab your brew and join me. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we talk about these two women in part 4 of our top 10 most dangerous women. Despite things circling the internet with people saying that they would not unalive for their child, I would like to say that people with motherly instincts would quite happily unalive somebody to protect their child, right? But this mother's twisted love became so twisted that, well, have you ever heard of the soap maker of Calgary? I know a few people of you sick, wonderful individuals may have heard of her. But this Italian lady took love a little bit too far. Her name is Leonarda, and she is all but committed to unaliving people and butchering them and also feeding them to people in the name of love, maybe, if you want to call it that. It would ultimately end her up in an asylum and then later on into a prison where she ultimately wrote her autobiography. And between the autobiography and her confessions, it would be two windows into just how deeply damaged this woman's mind really is. But before we put the cart before the horse, let's go and talk about her childhood. Now, she would endure an extremely traumatic childhood. Leonardo's mother was very psychologically abusive towards her because she was a child of grape. And being the early 1900s in Italy, her mother saw no other option but to marry her abuser. And he was a drunken, jobless, and very abusive man who would often grape her mother up until 6 years into their marriage. He passed away. And now she's a widow, so now she's available to marry somebody else because she didn't divorce, she wasn't out of wedlock. So luckily for her, I guess, she upgraded. She now has a man with a job. But poor Leonardo in this aspect because not only was she abused by her mother, she was now abused by this new husband. And by the time she was 13, she had crafted a noose and attempted to unalive herself, which resulted in a lot of bruising on her neck, and she was unable to talk for a little while. But of course, her mother would take no notice of this, right? Because she seriously did not care less about the pain that her daughter was feeling. Disgusting woman. She did attempt less than a year later to take her own life, but of course, she failed at that also. That sounded so wrong. It was a failed attempt. That was also a failed attempt. Let me reword that. Her mother started paying more attention to her when she became of marrying age. Now, I don't quite know what the marrying age was at this time. I'm suspecting young teens. But she was trying to marry her so she would get out of the poverty line. Her mother secretly wanted to be a socialite. But instead, Leonardo found a man by the name of Raphael who worked and he had a okay paying job. He was a clerk. But when she broke the news to her mother was extremely furious with her and cut her daughter off of whatever family inheritance she would have got and completely disowned her. Not only that, but she would, according to sources, to a very already superstitious Leonardo, she put a curse on her own daughter to live a very miserable life. Out of the total of 17 pregnancies, that's a lot of pregnancies. Think of the postpartum. But out of 17 pregnancies that she underwent, 3 resulted in miscarriage and 10 died as very young children. Only 4 would survive into adulthood, the eldest child being her favorite. And that favoritism soon became a deep obsession. Her first crime came about when she was living with Raphael's family. Leonardo worked as a janitor in a bank where she, for some reason, I don't know why she thought she would get away with this, but she wrote herself an account and tried to fill it with a ridiculous amount of money. And this landed her in an all female prison for fraud. As soon as she got out, she moved the family to a town where she found community with both the families in a neighborhood and the camps of Romania where the people would occupy the local woods. It was during her visits with the Romanians that she was taught how to read palms. how to read palms and took up the arts of fortune telling. Now, so side note, during this time, even though she was a fortune teller herself, she would also have seen a fortune teller. And one particular fortune teller told her basically a very horrid, self fulfilling prophecy. She said, "In your right hand, I see prison. In your left, I see a criminal asylum." During this time, she led very deep into these superstitions, these superstitious ways of the occult, basically. And this would be more and more drastic as time went on. And in the 1930s, there was a huge earthquake that hit the village and it forced them to move to Calgary. Leonardo began giving advice to young women, along with telling fortunes and reading palms, which gained her a reputation as a wise, motherly figure in the community. Before anyone made any life altering decisions, they visited her to see, I guess, if they should do it or not. I don't know. They gave this one woman too much power, apparently. But once again, there was a calm before the storm, meaning the upcoming storm was going to be absolutely brutal. In 1939, her favorite son enlisted in the Italian army. And this just sent her completely off her rocker into a tizzy, right? Biographers believe that her deep obsession with all the supernatural and superstition is what drove her to believe in human sacrifice. But there is no Romanian rituals that require a human sacrifice. But her position as the town's resident sweet mother figure would be incredibly useful for her very dark plot. This woman, she lured a middle-aged woman. She was a spinster and she was leaving Calgary. And this would be her first victim. Leonarda convinced her that she had found her a husband in a large town of Pola. And she also told her, "Shh, don't tell anybody of the news, but have letters to be delivered to them after your departure for your suitor." Hmm. Suspicious? I believe so. But again, hindsight's 2020. The woman was eternally grateful and ecstatic when she visited Leonardo one last time before her journey. She compensated her with $530. Now, $530 back then equals up to 9,500 today in dollars. And this was just for being helpful. But the wilder woman insisted that before she went on her journey, she celebrated with some wine. Hmm. The wine had been poisoned by Leonardo shortly before. With her first victim unconscious, she issued a death blow with an axe. Now, if you are squeamish, go ahead and skip forward a little bit because it does get a little bit. Ugh. Okay. So she gave her the death blow with an axe and butchered her, cutting her remains into 9 separate pieces. She would collect the blood she harvested during the butchering and leave it in a bowl to cool. Meanwhile, she dissolved chunks of flesh into a chemical called lye, then disposed of it in the sewage. Mm. Mm. The blood was then baked in the oven, which dried into a powder. Who knew? Don't think that's something I needed to know, but but the powder she would mix with regular flour, sugar, and milk and whatnot, and created delicious, delectable tea cakes. I tell you what, I'm never going to look at tea cake the same again after doing this research. But to make things worse is she fed these tea cakes not only to her neighbors and numerous friends, but also herself and her favorite son ate them too. For like over a few weeks, they were all ingesting this woman's blood, and they didn't even know about it. Not even years later. But not even a year later, she found a second victim, unfortunately. And this is a direct quote from her confession. I threw the pieces into the pot, added 7 kilos of custard soda, which I had brought to make soap, and stirred the mixture until the pieces dissolved into a thick dark mush. Then I poured into several buckets and emptied into the nearby septic tank. As for the blood in the basin, I waited until it had clotted, dried it in the oven, ground it, and mixed it in flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs, as well as a bit of margarine. Kneading all the ingredients together, I made a lot of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies that would come to visit me. I and my son also ate them. I wonder if her son knew. I wonder if he knew any of this. But her third victim would be the one that got her in trouble. She had something that the other people didn't. Now, Virginia had a family that cared about her. Initially, that didn't matter to Leonardo. She proceeded with her tried but true methods, once more, only with one alteration this time. Rather than disposing of the victim's fat, she melted it down and mixed it into soap bars. Just as she did with the tea cake, she gifted these products of her human sacrifice to her friends and even sold some to visitors. On top of that, she used some of it herself. But upon the disappearance of Virginia, her concerned sister-in-law, Albertina, let's go with Albertina, became very suspicious of the last place that the woman had been. She had also not believed the letter that she received detailing the reasons as to the brisk departure. Soon enough, Albertina reported the incident to the local authorities, and they began to investigate Leonardo. Now, Leonardo denied everything. She leaned very heavily into the reputation as a mother of 4 and the town's sweetheart. Just an itty bitty old lady that couldn't harm a fly. And they actually started to believe her, but then their attention started shifting to her amazing son, the one that could do no wrong. And in an instant, her tune soon changed. She started singing like a canary. She gave them details of everything she had done. In 1946, Leonardo went to trial and was found guilty on 3 counts of murder. His sentence would mirror exactly what the fortune teller told her. She spent 13 years in prison and 3 in a criminal asylum. Hmm. Did the woman know that she was a deep down psychopath? Or did this woman actually have the ability to know? Do, 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 do. Polish American serial killer. She was very active in Chicago only. According to legend, she pretended to have predictive dreams, saying that she could accurately predict people's death dates when in reality she was actually unaliving them herself. This born Polish woman, she came to the US as an infant with her parents. Tillie married her original husband, John. Now, she married John in 1890, and in 1914, he died after a very short illness. The death certificate listed cause of death as heart troubles, but she quickly remarried Joseph. Now, he lived nearby and he died in a very short manner too, as did her following boyfriend, who, as she said, jilted her. Eventually, she was tried for the murder of Frank, her third husband. He was taken ill in the apartment of 924 North Winchester, where Tillie had previously lived with her boyfriend under the name of Mayers. And she began to tell the neighbors stuff like, would not live long. She would mock Frank himself, greeting him in the morning, saying stuff like, won't be long now, you'll be dying soon. And she would joke with the neighbors about this, being like, he's within 2 inches of his life. She even so much as knitted her own mourning hat while sitting next to him, which she would later actually wear in the trial, by the way. And she even asked the landlady for permission to store a bargain coffin that she found for sale in the basement. Red flags. Red flags, guys. This may have been what sparked the legendary claim about how she could predict deaths. In 1921, after Frank's death, she married a Joseph and lived with him at 1453 Tal Place. That's now known as 1453 Thomas Street, where, when he became ill, doctors suspected arsenic poisoning, and tests confirmed it. Tillie was arrested. It was later said that she told the arresting officer, the next one I want to cook dinner for is you. No, thank you, Tillie. That's why you can't eat everybody's food, guys. Bodies of her other husbands were soon exhumed and they were found to contain arsenic. Though the soil around them was clean, so clearly they were poisoned. Police also arrested her cousin Natalia, her cousin Nellie. Tillie told the police that she had told Nellie that she was tired of her husband Frank. Nellie suggested divorce. Tillie said that I will get rid of them some other way, and claimed that Nellie had given her a goodly portion of what's called rough on rats. After her arrest, it came to light that 2 women who had died in the neighborhood, Tillie had a quarrel with them over God knows what. They probably just looked at her the wrong way or breathed in her vicinity. But in the Winchester Street house, she did actually create candy bars that were laced with arsenic. And 2 of these women passed away after. She even killed a dog because the dog annoyed her. You are a sick woman. Disgustingly, like you. I hope you're burning in hell. Children and animals are like my do not do list. I don't like to touch on those subjects. That poor puppers. But anyway, Several of Tillie and Nellie's cousins are becoming gravely ill shortly after eating Tillie's food in the house. And the list overall, when they found out who had become ill after eating behind stuff that Tillie had cooked, it was running in the 20 to 22 suspected victims, 14 of whom died. The papers, now this is what gets me. They didn't speak about her as if, oh, she's a serial killer, she's a murderer. In fact, they just labeled her the high priestess of a Bluebeard cliché in Chicago's Little Poland neighborhood. Other wives in the neighborhood were arrested and released later. I guess because people were dying, they were thinking that the wives were in on it. I'm not quite sure on that. But they were all found innocent. Now, Joseph would go on and to survive, although he did spend more than 3 months in the hospital. It was found that she had actually taken life insurance policies out on all of her husbands and was profiting greatly from this. In March of 1923, Tillie was found guilty of the murder of Frank. Her her third known husband. Reporters noted that unlike most of the husband killers who had been acquitted in Chicago courts, Tillie was not. She was not beautiful and or charming, but they labeled her as a squat, a woman who spoke only broken English despite having been in the country since infancy. She was sentenced to life in prison, the harshest sentence that they were given in that county at the time, especially for a woman. Now, her cousin was later acquitted after spending a year in prison through this long drawn out trial. Now, during this time, Tillie would be so cruel as to often tease her in prison, once convincing her that she was about to be taken out to go be hung. Tillie died in prison on November 20th, 1936. Well, that's the last of our two crazy, psychopathic, I guess, most dangerous women of the world. This is part 4 of the 5-part series of the 10 most dangerous women. Thank you for grabbing a brew with me and joining me for this crazy tale. Please, please, please like and subscribe and comment below. If you have any special requests, you can also email me at grabyourbrew@gmail.com for any particular requests you would like me to do a deep dive in. Thank you so much, guys.